It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, John Cerbone. Hey, John, how are you?
Doing fantastic, and thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. You are a hypnotist, according to your bio. Yeah?
Yes, that's what people call me. My whole life, I've been a hypnotist, basically. When I was a little boy, I invented a self-hypnosis technique about 3 or 4 years old, according to my mom. When my father had stressed me out, I'd lay in bed, stare at the ceiling, and blink my eyes, and eventually slip into a hypnotic state and then get up and clean the room with no stress on my back or body like all the other kids had. And I've been at this in various forms throughout my entire life. I was doing what turned out to be impromptu private sessions with kids in grammar school who were looking to run away from home, or in high school and college, possibly suicide and stuff. I asked them to close their eyes. I talked to them, and when they opened their eyes, they didn't want to do those things anymore. So I guess I was born into this somehow. I think we all have a calling, and it seems to be mine. So.
It says that you do both clinical and entertainment hypnosis. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. As the years went past my college years, I took this technique that I had created out into the world to help more people, and I was calling it empowerment meditation back in the day. And I didn't know exactly what to put a label on it with, and I was getting anywhere from a handful of people to sometimes hundreds and hundreds of people showing up to groups that I was doing. And at the end of a workshop one time, a fellow walked up to me and said, "You're one heck of a hypnotist. Come get trained." So I took the first certification, and now between certifications and awards, I'm like 46 or 48 different certifications and awards at this point for the things I've done. And I've never been complacent in my life, so I'm not complacent in the profession either. I keep looking for the next kick up in terms of quantum level results in terms of the clinical stuff that I do. So I've written 4 clinical hypnosis books detailing technique I've come up with. And with the entertainment stuff, about 25, 26, 27 years ago, whatever it's been, I was doing a lecture someplace and a group program for, I think it was a company. And somebody walked up to me and said, "Well, we just had a fundraiser last week. We're raising money to help children with cancer. Can you come back next year for our fundraiser and help do a show?" And my attitude was, "You mean like a lighthearted lecture demonstration?" They said, No, one of those funny comedy shows, the ones we saw in high school, college, cruise ships. Can you do that? So I studied with some people at the time who were masters in this field. Some of them are now deceased. And I just kept at it, and I really love doing the shows. With the private session clinical stuff, you run into a lot of issues people have, and I'm glad to help them and make change happen in their lives. It's a big portion of what I do. But with the shows, I walk out, I'm a hero, and it's the only job I know where I have a lot of fun. You can get paid for having fun and laugh at the same time. So it's just, I dig into it, and with the shows, I was kind of growing up on the rock culture that I grew up in those years with the Rolling Stones and different bands. And to me, when I do a show, it's to be bigger than the audience, be bigger than life, and lots of high energy, which puts the show in a lot of people's minds, from what I've been told, in a slightly higher echelon because it's high entertainment, bang, bang, in your face stuff. And I really happen to love doing the shows. There's nothing that lights me up more than doing a show. I really, really love my show work.
Just so people understand the difference between clinical and entertainment hypnosis. Clinical hypnosis is, I've heard people use it to quit smoking, to lose weight, to make some change in their life that they don't like. And you do that through hypnotic suggestion?
What I generally do is either private individuals, couples or children, or even groups, corporate groups or individual community groups. I will come in and I will explain what hypnosis is, shoot down misconceptions. There are just so many misconceptions from TV and the movies. For example, the 2 biggest books at the turn of the last century were Svengali and Trilby, about a fictional evil hypnotist, and Dracula, which was all about hypnosis, which is, let's face it, Transylvania, the Count, Stare into My Eyes. It's all hypnotic stuff. But basically, shoot down all the misconceptions, explain what I'm going to do. I've already written the session before they come in or before I do something for a group. So I've already designed it. That takes hours to do, to write it first and then rewrite it in hypnotic language patterns that I've come up with over the years, my own style. And then I perform it. And basically, in a private session, I discuss everything, misconceptions, the steps I'm going to take, silly questions I've been asked over the years. I used to believe there was no such thing as a silly question, but if you live long enough, you'll hear a few. And I cover all the bases, explain step by step what I'm going to do, and then I do an induction procedure to get them hypnotized by speaking to them in a private session mode. I can also do a speed induction. I've created many of those. We'll get to that in a moment. And then I will deliver clinical suggestions to motivate an improvement in their life. I'm also big on using instant reinforcements as a way of creating triggers in a person to get them to feel better as they live their lives. For example, sounds from outside, car horns, sirens, car alarms, barking dogs, planes flying by, and telephone noises instantly reinforce all the benefit and suggestion and adaptation your mind will create to all hypnotic suggestions I give you. And that way the subconscious mind is on improvement mode 24 hours a day. Even when they're sleeping, they can hear those noises. And then I bring them out of hypnosis. And I also, in the session, especially private sessions, record a live MP3. And then I email it to them, and I use that as a reinforcement tool. With the shows, it's a different ball game. I hypnotize them, and they're doing silly, crazy things. They're milking cows that aren't there. They change size and shape. They're dancing. They're swatting flies and stamping out ants at a picnic. That doesn't really exist. It's all in their imagination. And that's a lot of fun because it's a comedy performance. But the clinical stuff, the top private sessions tend to be, like, as you said, smoking cessation, weight reduction and control, stress management, a better night's sleep, overcoming breakups is a big one, overcoming a fear, and public speaking, for example, is a major fear. It's the top fear every year. And other things like sleeping better and other things I'm probably forgetting. It's always trying to remember the names of the 7 dwarves or the 12 apostles. You're liable to drop one or two of them because there's a list if you haven't got it in front of you. But basically, a lot of the sessions tend to run in that same vein. It's always one of those groupings. However, I've had a lot of unusual private sessions come in for things that are kind of left field. Like, for example, I've worked with kids who have mild autism when they've been referred to me by doctors. And I find when the kid has those symptoms, if you put them into hypnosis, the symptoms reduce. And the way I found out about that was I was doing a show as a fundraiser for kids with autism, and I was at a religious institution, and the man running the place I was talking to, and he was busy talking to everybody else, and I said to him, I haven't worked with those kids before, maybe it's better the kids are not in the show. And they put out way too many chairs for volunteers to come up, and the next thing, 10 kids grabbed their own chairs and put chairs up there. And I didn't have the heart to send them away, and I was 5 minutes off the end of that show, and some young girl who was in the show's dad walks in. I want my daughter out of your show. And I said, he went to go grab her out of the chair. I said, she's in hypnosis. I get her out of hypnosis, leave her alone for a moment. I took her out of hypnosis, and after the show was over, he walked up to me, he was crying. And he said to me, I'm such a jerk that I pulled her out of your show. I said, what do you mean? He said, most of her symptoms are gone. This is not the little girl I have to fight with every morning to get dressed to go to school.
Wow.
She ran up to me and she hugged me and kissed me on the face. She never does that. And I'm getting a little emotional telling the story, but the reality is that it created a tremendous change in that little girl. I've worked with kids who've been traumatized. I remember years ago during 9/11, some of the schools wheeled in televisions and kept showing that disaster to these little kids in grammar school.
Yeah.
I did a lot of work to help kids back in those days with that, to overcome. They were waking up at 3 a.m. screaming with nightmares. And I submit a lot of that down. So I work with children as well, as they say. I hope I'm explaining this well.
Oh, yeah, very well.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. And you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
I was going to throw a name out at you and see what your response was. Pat Collins.
I happen to have loved her work. I'm sorry I never got to meet her. Somebody a while back showed me some of the specials that she did on Showtime. It's funny. There were times when I do my show where I get a little saucy like she did. You know, some of the jokes seem a little similar to me. I mean,
yeah.
It seems to be we're tapping into some sort of giant vein of that kind of humor in the universe. It was funny because in 2012, I believe it was, I was out working the Emmy Award parties in L.A., and I did a show, I was doing demonstrations at an event I was invited to for the Los Angeles Times, and the owner-editor of the paper came up to me. I hypnotized his daughter. Through suggestion, I speed hypnotized her. I glued her to a chair and told her she couldn't get up. The harder she'd try and get up, the stucker she'd become. I looked over, he was hysterical laughing, and had a conversation with him. And he said, I can't believe you got my daughter to do that. She's so serious and all this stuff. And I said, well, really nice to meet you. You know, we have a hypnotist out here ourselves. And I said, who's that? And he said, Pat Collins. I said, you know, she died like 20 years ago. She did. I said, do you publish the paper? He said, yes. I said, do you read the obituary area? So he was laughing. The two of us had a good joke about that. But I happen to like her work. I think she was really a good hypnotist. And I happen to love her appearance, which is on YouTube, if anybody wants to look that up, on the Lucy show, the show that was done after I Love Lucy went off the air, where she worked as a secretary. There's a funny story about that episode, too, which is more like an urban legend. The story goes, and people have professed to me it's absolutely true, that when Pat Collins asked Lucy while they were filming, and what is your name, ma'am? She was supposed to respond in her character's name. And they were shooting this at Desilu Studios that she owned. And Lucy got quite abrupt and said, what's my name? What's my name? I own this entire place with a couple of expletives in there. My name is Lucille Ball. The whole world knows who I am. And the audience was laughing, and I had to stop the filming and take her backstage and get her to respond while she was hypnotized. While she was in that program, she was actually hypnotized in that show. And Pat Collins was quite a force of nature in her day. She had her own nightclub in L.A. with a partner that ran the restaurant and alcohol aspect of it, and she'd go out on stage every night and work. And I think that's a dream job. I mean, if that could exist now, I'd be first in line looking for a job there, because I think it's the absolute ideal position. Pat Collins was a trip. I'm only sorry I didn't get to meet her.
Was she kind of the pioneer of the modern-day stage hypnotist? Or were there people that came before her that were...
In some ways, because she was out there in the public eye. There were a lot of other hypnotists out there in the day. I tend to watch some classic TV shows from when I was a kid, and I was watching some Dragnet episode, and they're driving around, and they have some street scenes of them, the unmarked police car driving by, and they drive past a day shot and a night shot of Tryan Boyer, who was a stage hypnotist and apparently was an influence on Pat's career. And he was doing a club show in a similar environment to something she had back in those days. And he was a very famous hypnotist in the day. I know a colleague down in Georgia who had actually seen him perform. There are video clips of him, two of them, on 2 episodes of You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx, where he hypnotized a page at NBC into a key word, had this guy dancing around and jigging around, jumping around like nobody's business. And every time he said another word, the kid would just stop and go back to a nice, complacent young man working at NBC. And then repeated the same word. He'd be jumping around, and they'd be playing music in the background for him to dance to. So there was quite a few of this. Most people don't understand the history of this field I'm in. You know, this hypnosis is a natural state that the human mind goes into on a regular basis, a minimum of 7 times a day, in order to cycle down stress levels in the mind and the brain. So consequently, when you dazed off into space in school and the teacher called on you and you had no clue what the teacher was saying, and maybe your knucklehead friend in the next seat would lean over and intentionally give you the wrong answer and you repeat it, that's all hypnosis and suggestion stuff. So the hypnosis goes back to the dawn of civilization. Anytime you're zoned out staring at a wall or a TV show, or laughing or crying at a movie on TV or in the movie theater, or watching a martial arts or boxing film, and feel your shoulders are twitching, beating up the bad guy, when in reality you're not in the movie and there is no bad guy except on the screen. All of that stuff. We're driving a car, you're not sure how you got there in one piece, but there you are. That's all hypnosis stuff that happens naturally.
Right.
You go through it to fall asleep or to wake up. So consequently, we're a lot more hypnotized than we think. I would say Pat put a lot of energy into going out into the world and explaining what hypnosis was to a general public audience. But one of my personal friends who passed away was a fellow named Orman McGill, and he had been on TV from the black and white television days, and was a personal friend and to a degree a mentor in my work. One of the kindest, most decent men you'd ever meet, and yet he was in a movie, I think, here and there, like I forget the titles of the movies he was in, but you know, not as popular or well known by the public as Pat Collins, but certainly had done a lot more performances than she did. Stage hypnosis kept what we now call modern-day private session or clinical hypnosis, or in some parts of the country you're allowed to use the word hypnotherapy, around or alive enough that we can actually have it as a profession today, because in certain moments in history when hypnosis fell out of favor, for example, with the French aristocracy, with Mesmer, stage hypnotists, even back in those days, kept hypnosis alive. So occasionally I'll bump into someone in the profession, oh, you're one of those stage hypnotists. Yeah, without stage hypnosis, there wouldn't be private session hypnosis nowadays. And to be a stage hypnotist, in my view, if you're any good at it, you really need to know what you're doing in front of an audience. You have to think on your feet. You have to have lightning fast thoughts and reflexes as to what's going on, because you're moving through a live sea of people. And Pat Collins did that exceptionally well. I'm a big fan of her work.
So being a stage hypnotist is almost akin to being a stand-up comic, yeah?
Yeah, except it's the people in the chairs that are hypnotized who are actually doing most of your comedy work for you through suggestions, which is not to say I don't put jokes into my show or do some of Pat's style of humor at times. I mean, before I even saw her, at least in my adult years, I probably saw those shows when I was a tiny kid, I do have a similar sense of humor in certain ways. And in the past also, which is not in my bio, I had written jokes I'd emailed to the late Rodney Dangerfield when he was around. So I do have a sort of a comic background, because Rodney used to tell some of my jokes.
Oh, okay.
So I can think on my feet on the fly. And, you know, I grew up in New York City. We do have a sort of a sarcastic wit around here in New York, and that can translate really well if you're in the middle of a show and you want to say something or make a remark about someone. You know, a show I did some time back, I had a woman acting like an opera singer, and the man next to her was desperate to be a female opera singer for some reason, a big guy with a beard. So I played the track a second time and had him be the female opera singer. I mean, and the audience liked him even better than the lady. So it's a matter of being quick on your feet and thinking, like, how can I make this work? How can I make that work? But Pat was certainly somebody out there doing yeoman's work as far as I'm concerned. I would love to have met her at some point. But there are people like that sift through your fingertips like picking up sand on the beach. And yet I've met plenty of others like my friend Orman McGill that wrote, 25 of his own books and collaborated on another 25 books. So the man's work will stand as long as there's books.
What do you say to the naysayers? The ones that say, it's all fake, it's all staged, there's no substance to this.
Well, I mean, if it's a comedy hypnosis show, if I'm walking out there as a stage hypnotist or a comedy hypnotist, depending upon whose website you're looking at or whose job site you're looking to book somebody from, I would say to you that I'm walking up there with a bunch of strangers I've never laid eyes on before. I mean, if it's a school show or something and I'm back year after year at a school, I may have seen one or two of them the previous year. But generally speaking, I'm walking in ice cold to a group of strangers who are then going to walk up there with me and get hypnotized and do a lot of strange things and jump around in ways they would never normally do. I can remember one of my earlier shows. I think there's a clip of that still on YouTube. I put that up from back when I was still making videos off, video cassettes inside cameras. There was a woman I did an outdoor show with. I'll never forget her. Kind of a stocky lady with bib overalls that had been cut down into shorts. And her and her husband were from Scotland. It was at a county fair. And she was super reactive in the show. She was unbelievable. Like I said, it was raining, and somebody threw ice cubes down her back. And she was pumping her legs like the movie Flashdance with the knees up to her shoulders, jumping around. And the husband said to me after the show was over, she is the most introverted woman you'd ever meet in your entire life. In her wildest fantasies, wildest imagination, she would never, ever, ever do anything like this. And yet she was an entirely different person up on that stage. The naysayers really, and I say this with all due respect, as we say in New York, really don't have a clue as to what's going on. I can remember seeing like an early version of a stage show when I was very young and thinking, I can't believe those people are actually doing that. But again, now that I'm in the field and I do this for a living, I know for a fact that they actually are. So occasionally I'll get people who want to argue with me over that. And I sometimes fall back on the idea of like, who's the world-class expert on this, me or you? I've got the experience doing this. And, I don't know anybody in this profession that's willing to put fake people in their show that would only destroy that person's professional reputation. I've had a couple of people in my past offer that, and they say, I could do that. I'm like, I don't need them. And I wouldn't want them anyway. I would prefer to have real people up there doing the things I've always done. I find it personally, just between yourself and myself and this audience that's going to listen to this, a personal affront that somebody would suggest that to me, because it's just silly. The stuff that I have people doing in my shows are in good taste. I will not shame, embarrass, or humiliate anybody in my shows. I'm very fond of saying I've met many of you. You've done it all to yourself so much better than I could ever do in terms of those three things. I would never dare to presume on your skills to shame, embarrass, and humiliate yourselves, so there's no room for that in my show. And at the end of my shows, I give them empowerment from the clinical end of things. And I tell them they've had a 9-hour nap and a 7-hour back and foot rub, and they're feeling on top of the world. I've had people come up to me after the shows and tell me that they've never been able to feel as good as they do after one of my shows, that they haven't felt that good in years. Or I've had people tell me, there was one woman, I did a show one time in New Jersey a couple of years back, and this woman had a genuine problem being able to walk around. She had pain in her legs, stiffness in her joints. And she got up, and she used to be an Irish step dancer, kind of an older woman, definitely grandmom, age. And all of a sudden, she was doing Irish step dancing moves that she hadn't done in 30 or 40 years, she told me.
Wow.
And she was unable to do it. She developed arthritis in her legs. And her muscles loosened up, and her joints loosened up. Because I said at the end, your body's going to start to feel better no matter what it takes. Your body will recirculate itself. It'll start to feel better. And the suggestion took with her. So I've seen a lot of amazing changes in people from the private sessions, but also by doing the stage work, one kind of feeds into the other and back and forth. So I'm able to pick up certain things from one and then add it to the other. And it just increases the yield on what I'm able to do in both.
Hey, John, we got to wrap this up. We are just out of time. My guest,
wow, did that go by fast?
Yeah, it went by
Thank
real
you.
fast. My guest is John Cerbone. What is your website? Give it out so people can come check you out.
I have two websites. One is hypnosisstageshow.com. That's hypnosisstageshow.com. The other one is hypnotistpro.com. That's the clinical end. That's hypnotistpro.com. And you can reach me any hour of the day via email or phone or whatever you need to do. I'd be happy to talk to you about coming into work for you for a show or a fundraising event or a school or a university. Or if it's a private session, I can do it on Skype or whatever it takes, even all over the world. Or you can see me in person in New York City.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask if you were doing this online now with COVID and all that, about doing one.
Yeah, I do a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of that I do now, yeah. The shows are a little more challenging, but I believe I found ways to do a socially distanced show by spreading the people out far enough and everybody wearing masks. And I believe that that's something that is actually within all the guidelines. It's a lot more work, but it's definitely doable for the shows.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on the show. This was a lot of fun. Very interesting. Best of luck with
You were an absolute delight to work with. Thank you so very much for having me.
You're very welcome.